وأكرمنا بمعرفة العلم وزين أخلاقنا بالحلم يا أرحم الراحمين آمين آمين أخذ عن الحمد لله رب العالمين. أما بعد, today we're going to be continuing. If you could just see how to transition between these things. There's the two documents. If you could just show me how to do it. Okay, there you go. All right. Today we're going to be continuing with our class on Fiqh of Salah. We're going over this book here, as we said. This book is a commentary on what we call a matan. And that matan is called Matan al-Ghaya wa Taqrib, or Matan Abi Shuja'. In English, he has an interesting few words that they are the accessible conspectus or the ultimate conspectus. Matan al-Ghaya wa Taqrib is a fiqh manual. What does that mean? Who is this authored by? This book was authored by one of the great Shafi'i jurists. He was a judge many, many years ago. His name is Al-Qadi Abu Shuja' Al-Asfahani. And before we actually get into the book, we'll say a few words about him, because this is his right upon us. He's someone who left behind a legacy that was worthy of mention almost 1,000 years later. He was born in the year 1042. That's in the Common Era, the Gregorian calendar, 1042. That we're in the year 2023. We pray to Allah Azza wa Jal that we could be of the people who do something that's worthy of mention 1,000 years later. It's literally almost 1,000 years since Al-Qadi Ahmed ibn Hussein Abu Shuja' Al-Asfahani was born. And in the Hijri, that is 433 after Hijrah, 433 after Hijrah. He, as you could tell by his name, was one of the great scholars from Persia. Persia, Asfahan, Persia, what's now known as those areas around Iran. For many, many centuries, that region produced a lot of scholarship. And it did not have anything to do with the Sunni-Shia divide. That's something that came way later on, after the Sassanid Empire. If you read about history, Asfahan was one of the great bastions of Islam. Many great scholars came, many scholars of hadith, like Imam Abu Dawood, Imam Tirmidhi, and others, Muslim, Sahih Muslim, and even Imam Bukhari from the lands of Bukhara, Uzbekistan, and even the likes of Imam Ghazali, Imam al-Razi. Many brilliant minds came out of that region. And he himself was from ancient Persia. He taught the fiqh to people for 40 years. He was appointed as the judge of Asfahan. You could see this on page 1 in the book. It's in the introduction. He was appointed as the judge of Asfahan. And they say that he lived for 150 years. That's what they say. He lived for 150 years. But not just that, he did that without losing control of his faculties. He was very healthy, very strong until old age. They asked him, how did you attain this great fiat? So he said, حفظناها في الصغر فحفظها الله علينا في الكبر. He said, we preserved our limbs in servitude and devotion to Allah Azza wa Jal. We preserved it from haram in our younger years, so Allah preserved it for us in our later years. So Imam Al-Qadi Abu Shuja' was one of the great scholars of our past. He wrote this book. It's actually a very concise book. This is a commentary on the book again. It's a modern commentary by someone by the name of Sheikh Musa Ferber. He's a very good translator and a very knowledgeable scholar, especially for people in the English audience today. May Allah preserve him. He published many other works as well. So the actual book is in the WhatsApp group. The actual book, Matan Abi Shuja', is in the WhatsApp group. You'll find it there. It's in PDF form. So if you don't have this book, you could at least access that one. Why is it so concise? If you look at it, you're going to find that it's a bunch of lists, conditions, rules, definitions, breakdowns, categories. Why was it so concise? Fiqh went through many different renditions throughout the centuries. It took time for it to develop and become a robust science that was easily accessible. And this started with the early Imams, among them the four great Imams, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, and Imam Ahmad. And throughout the ages, the scholars wrote books, and they tried to package and repackage and explain and break down the information until, in a certain point in our history, they wanted to make sure that fiqh was so accessible that even children could memorize it. So that's why they even wrote poems in fiqh. This metin is an introductory manual that long ago children used to study, so that it gives them a bird's eye view. What am I studying? So if you want an easy way to review what we're breaking down, you go to the manual. You go to the metin, and then the sharh or the explanation would be there to fill in all the gaps in understanding. So that's a little bit about the book we're studying, Metin al-Ghaya wa Taqrib. And he actually tells us in the introduction why he wrote it. Because scholars from the past, they didn't write books for no reason at all. They didn't write it just to fill the pages. They wrote it for profound reasons. He wanted to write a book that was easy to memorize, easy to grasp, easy to review. And he did it because some of the students of knowledge during his time asked him if he could possibly do that. And so that's what he set forth to do. And inshallah, we're going to study this book. And as we start it, we make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showers Imam al-Qadi Abu Shuja' with His mercy. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower him with His rahmah and His maghfirah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him for the struggles and the efforts that he put forth for the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him the reward of us reading his book almost 1,000 years later. Ameen. He mentions on this first page a few other people you should know about. One of them is Imam al-Shafi'i, because he's someone who's referenced a lot in this book. Now, Imam al-Shafi'i, books have been written just as a biography about his life, because there's just so much to say about the life of Imam al-Shafi'i. But just a small tidbit is to know a little bit about when he died, when he was born, when he died, and a few key things that he did. Does anyone know when Imam Shafi'i was born? Anyone know when Imam Shafi'i was born? Anyone know that? He was born in the year 150 after Hijrah. 150 after Hijrah. Just to give you context, the last companion of the Prophet ﷺ passed away, they say, in the year 101, 102 after Hijrah. That was the last companion. His name was Amr ibn Wathila. This companion, the Prophet ﷺ said in one of the hadiths, subhanAllah, he said, after 100, he was addressing the companions. And he said to them, after 100 years from today, no one on the surface of the earth will remain upon its surface. They'll all be underneath. And subhanAllah, about 100 years to the date of the Prophet ﷺ saying this, they say he passed away 101, 102. This last companion of the Prophet ﷺ passed away. So Imam al-Shafi'i was born 50 years after the passing of the last companion. He's actually considered, maybe you could say, 3 generations after the companions. He's not from the tabi'een, and he's not from atba' tabi'een, he's from their students. Wallahu a'lam. So, or he's from atba' tabi'een, one of them. But anyway, he's not from the successors. So we have one generation, they're the companions. The successors, they are the students of the companions, right? And then the successors of the successors are the generation after that. Imam al-Shafi'i was born on the same year that Imam Abu Hanifa actually passed away. Imam Abu Hanifa passed away, Imam al-Shafi'i was born. Imam Abu Hanifa is the oldest of the 4 Imams that are mentioned in the Madhahib. So, and Imam al-Shafi'i lived from 150 till 204. Imam al-Shafi'i, other important fact about him, he's Muhammad ibn Idris. He is from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's from Quraysh. He's al-Muttalibi, al-Imam al-Muttalibi. He is Sharif. His ancestral tree goes back to 2 companions, Shafi' and Sa'ib. That's why he's called the Shafi'i, by the way. Shafi' and Sa'ib. So Sa'ib was the father of Shafi'. Sa'ib and Shafi' both witnessed the Battle of Badr. Sa'ib was alive before Islam. He accepted Islam. His son Shafi' was born into Islam. His son Shafi' was born into Islam. He liked to be attributed to Shafi'. You know why? Because he never witnessed a day of idolatry and shirk. He never witnessed a day. So he liked to be called a Shafi'i for this reason, because of his ancestor who was a companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so this is what's unique about Imam al-Shafi'i. He lived for a long part of his life in Iraq. Before that, in his younger years, Imam al-Shafi'i actually was taken from Gaza by his mother, who was his caretaker, because his father had passed away. He was taken to Mecca to study Islam. And he learned Islam, he memorized the Quran, he became very strong and established in the Arabic language. And actually he went and he lived with one of the Arab tribes who were in the rural areas. They're called Qabilat Hudayl. He became very strong in Arabic language. And then from Mecca, he went to Medina and he became a student of Imam Malik. And he had such powerful memory that he memorized the book of Imam Malik's Muwatta. They say, you guys ever heard of the Muwatta of Imam Malik? Any of you heard of it? Any of you? It's this big book in Hadith and Fiqh that Imam Malik wrote. He memorized the book in 9 days. They say that he had such powerful memory that he would put one hand on one side so that he doesn't get distracted. He didn't want to get distracted between this page and that page. He wanted to focus. He had very powerful memory. And so he memorized this book, Al-Muwatta, in 9 days. He went to Medina. He became a student of Imam Malik. He went to Iraq. He studied with the students of Abu Hanifa, Abu Yusuf, and others. And he lived for a large part of his life in Iraq. And in the later years, he went to Egypt. And he lived for the last few years of his life in Egypt, where he passed away and where he's buried today. His place, Imam Shafi'i's grave, is known in Egypt today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower his blessings upon Imam Shafi'i, this great Imam who was known for his piety and his salah, and so much more to say. If any of this interested you, I would invite you and encourage you, spend some time by yourself to learn about the biography of Imam Shafi'i. Put it as one of your tasks. I just gave you a snippet from his life. There's a lot there to be inspired by. Imam al-Nawawi is also one of the great scholars of fiqh, and he's going to be mentioned a lot in this book. So, a few quick words about Imam al-Nawawi. How many of you know Imam al-Nawawi? Raise your hand. How many of you know Imam al-Nawawi? Raise your hand high if you know Imam al-Nawawi. Okay, I thought more people would know him. We need to know Imam al-Nawawi. How many of you have heard of a book called Riyadh al-Salihin or Gardens of the Righteous? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Okay, I'm seeing more hands for that. The author of that book, his name is Imam al-Nawawi, all right? And he also authored this book called 40, he didn't author it, he collected it. It's a book of hadith. It's 40 Nawawi hadiths. Very important book to study. Imam al-Nawawi was one of the great scholars who many believe had such a high level of sincerity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is best aware, but Allah put so much blessings in his knowledge even though he had such a short life. He only lived for 45 years. Imam al-Nawawi passed away when he was 45 years old. He actually came way later on. Imam al-Nawawi, he was born about 790 years ago. 790 years ago, that's when Imam al-Nawawi, he was born. And he was born, if you want to know the exact year, 1234 Common Era. This is 631 after Hijrah. Imam al-Nawawi, his full name, his actual name was Yahya, right? Yahya ibn Sharaf. His laqab was Abu Zakaria, right? His kunya was Abu Zakaria. His laqab was Muhyiddin. His actual name is Yahya ibn Sharaf al-Nawawi. Why was he referred to as Imam al-Nawawi? Those who said they know him, why was he referred to as Imam al-Nawawi? You guys know? Huh? Not Nainawa. Nainawa, that's Sayyidina Yunus, Yunus ibn Matta. لا في مدينة ثانية. Why? Go ahead, تفضلي. لا. When Nawa? When? Jazakallah khair. It's Dar'a. It's southern, south of Damascus. It's what's known as today's Dar'a. If any of you guys know Syria, it's this area called Dar'a. That's where Imam al-Nawawi was from, Nawa. right? It has nothing to do with Qanabil Nawawiyah, by the way. I'm just joking. Nawawi in our day and age refers to something so far from Imam al-Nawawi. Imam Nawawi, Nawawi today refers to nuclear, but it has nothing to do with that. Nawawi nisbatan ila Nawa. It's a town in Syria. Anyway, Imam al-Nawawi lived for 45 years, and they say a little bit about his life. When he was a young boy, he memorized the Quran, and he was focused on memorizing the Quran. And part of this focus was that he didn't want to get distracted with playing with the children. In fact, there was this scene from his life. There was this sheikh, he came from Morocco. His name was Shaykh Yasin ibn Yusuf al-Murrakeshi. You know where the earthquake happened? Near Marrakesh. May Allah give ease to the people of Morocco. Allahumma ameen. This great sheikh was from that area. His name is Yasin ibn Yusuf al-Murrakeshi. He came and he saw this young boy trying to focus on memorizing the Quran, and these other kids trying to distract him. They wanted him to come play. And he started crying from how much they were bothering him because they wanted him to come play. And he didn't want to go play. And so when he saw this, he knew that Imam Nawawi was special. Not that playing is bad, but sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dedicates some people's lives to achieve certain great things that the normal person can't achieve. And among them is Imam Nawawi. He's an example for us all. So this sheikh went to the teacher of Imam Nawawi, and he said, take care of this young boy, because if he lives, I believe he'll be the most knowledgeable person of his time. So the sheikh was like, the Quran teacher was like, how do you know? Do you get wahi or something? What are you saying? How do you know this? So the sheikh said, no. لكن هذا منطق أنطقني الله عز وجل به. No, but I feel that this is something that Allah put on my tongue to say. I can't help but see that this person in front of me is special. He's not an ordinary kid. So he told his father, and his father, as soon as he became 19, he used to help his father when he was younger. He was memorizing Quran, learning the basics of Islam. He was working, right? He was working. It's not like today when, kids stay 25, 30, fully dependent on their parents, not working a day in their life. Very unfortunate. But anyway, the reality of the past was, kid was a teenager working really hard. It built character, and it taught a lot of perspective on life. Anyway, Imam Nawawi, as soon as he became 19, his father took him to Dimashq. And he let him live in one of the schools of Dimashq, because it wasn't like now where you could just take your car and drive, commute to school or college. No, he had to live there. And he lived in a small room. They say that there was so many books in his room that there was no place to sit. Whenever someone would visit Imam al-Nawawi, in order to sit down, they had to push the books out of the way to find a place to sit. Imam al-Nawawi, they say, he spent 6 years fully dedicated to ilm. He had 12 classes a day. Each one of them was an hour long. The rest of the day was spent on reviewing those lessons. They say, مَا نَامَ إِلَّا غَلَبَ. He never would sleep unless sleep overcame him. And he would sleep on top of his books. Fully dedicated to it. And then in his later years, he wrote so many works in so many subjects, by the way. It's not just Riyadh al-Salihin or 40 Nawawi Hadith. He wrote Sharh Sahih Muslim. He wrote many books in Hadith and many books in Mustalah, and in the science of Hadith. And he wrote many books in Fiqh, Minhaj, Majmu', and many others as well. So this is, in fact, in fact, they say that one of the last books that he wrote it's called At-Tahqiq lil Imam Nawawi. He actually started writing it, and then he reached the chapter on traveler prayers, and then he traveled, right? He passed away as he reached the book on Salat al-Musafirin. ثم سافر ورحل عن هذه الدنيا. He passed away. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon him and elevate his status. It's very rare to find a scholar who gathers between three things. So you could find someone who's very intelligent, very cerebral, knowledgeable, academic. You could find someone who's a really good activist, very outspoken, speaking the word of truth. You could find someone who's known for his ibadah and his worship and his wara' and his taqwa. But to find a scholar who gathers all three, this is very rare. And this is something they say was gathered in Imam al-Nawawi. He had all three of these things. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon him and benefit us from his knowledge and from the legacy that he left behind. Allahumma ameen. That's a little bit about some of the characters that we're going to be mentioning in this book. I hope by now you would have read the introduction, because right now we're going to go right into Fiqh of Salah. The first few pages of the introduction, you'll find that a lot of the material there is what we spoke about last time. So you can go back to that and access it, inshaAllah. Right now, if you turn to page 47 of your book, we're going to start explaining Fiqh of Salah, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Page 47. Now, when it comes to Fiqh of Salah, it's very important to know the merit and virtue and makana of Salah in Islam, which is very, very esteemed. I need to know how valuable and how precious the Salah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed me with is. Of course, we know it's one of Arkan al-Islam. We know it's one of the pillars of the deen. We know that it was mentioned as a command in the Quran in so many ayat. وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةِ. Established prayers. We know that it is the only of the 5 pillars that was required in the Mecca period. You guys know all of so the remaining 3 pillars, of course we have the Shahada, that's different. The testimony of faith, that's how you become a Muslim. But among the actions in the 5 pillars of Islam, the only one that was mandated in Mecca was Salah, right? The other 3 were mandated in Medina, not in Mecca. Now, when was it mandated? Now, of course, in the very beginning of Islam, we didn't have the 5 salawat, right? We had what Surah Al-Muzammil tells us about. قِيَامُ اللَّيْلِ يَا أَيُّهَا الْمُزَّمِّلْ قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا نِصْفَهُ أَوْ انْقُصْ مِنْهُ قَلِيلًا. Right? In the first year of Islam, as we learned from an authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, praying Qiyamul Layl was obligatory on the Prophet ﷺ and the companions. Then, after 12 months of doing this, as the hadith mentions, the last verse of the surah was revealed. إِنَّ رَبَّكَ يَعْلَمُ أَنَّكَ تَقُومُ أَدْنَى مِنْ ثُلُثَيِ اللَّيْلِ وَنِصْفَهُ وَثُلُثَهُ وَطَائِفَةٌ مِنَ الَّذِينَ مَعَكَ وَاللَّهُ يُقَدِّرُ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ عَلِمَ أَن لَّن تُحْصُوهُ فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ فَاقْرَؤُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. So this last verse in Surah Al-Muzammil actually removes the obligation of Qiyamul Layl after 1 year from the companions. Many scholars say that this obligation stayed on the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ was still obligated to pray Qiyamul Layl. It was a recommendation for the companions, no longer an obligation. Until the 5 daily prayers came. And I hope that a good number of you would know when the 5 daily prayers came. When was that? Huh? Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj. It is the only hukum shar'i. So the 5 daily prayers is the only legal ruling that we have that was given from Allah Azza wa Jal directly, bidun wasita Jibreel, to the Prophet ﷺ. When the Prophet ﷺ went in Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, the night journey, until he reached Sidratul Muntaha, and Jibreel alayhi salam said to the Prophet ﷺ, if I go a step forward, I will be burned. I can't endure it. I can't go any further. So the Prophet ﷺ was given 50 salawat, and you know the story if you're in detail. He went back and Musa alayhi salam kept on telling him, ask for less because Banu Israel could not endure this and it'll be a big difficulty for your for your people. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, he was told, خمسة في العدد خمسون في الأجر. 5 in number, 50 in reward. Times 10 yani. 5 in number and 50 in reward. So this is why Salah, this is one of the reasons why Salah actually has a great status in Islam. Has a great status in Islam. They say that Salah is the best physical act of worship. They say Salah is the best physical act of worship. What does that mean, physical act of worship? Well, if you look at the PowerPoint here, the categories of actions, there are a few different categories that your actions could fit into. You have actions of the heart, actions of the limbs, and then you have financial acts of worship. These are 3 categories. أعمال القلوب, أعمال الجوارح, and you have the أعمال that are with your money, the actions that are with your money. So actions of the heart, of course, these are the best. Number 1. without a doubt. Because the foundations of Iman are all on this. What are actions of the heart? Like patience, certainty, sincerity. These are a'mal al-qulub. Without sincerity, there's no Iman. Without patience, there's no Iman. Like if patience is completely removed. Now, of course, patience is of different degrees. But we know the companions themselves. أَلَا إِنَّهُ لَا إِيمَانَ لِمَنْ لَا صَبْرَ لَهُ. There's no faith for someone who has absolutely no patience whatsoever. Right? So anyway, actions of the heart, absolutely number one. Because on their basis, your actions will be accepted or rejected. Right? Then we have, after that, actions of the limbs. Your body, what are you doing outwardly? What is included in that? Salah, fasting, supplication, recitation of the Quran. Those are the things that are a'mal al-jawarih, actions of the limbs. And then we have financial acts of worship. What are financial acts of worship? Sadaqat, zakah. Sadaqah is general charity. Zakah is the obligated charity. Another example of a financial act of worship is a loan, giving a qard. This is an act of worship because, right, they're from uqud al-irfaq. Giving loans is not meant to be for the purpose of profit because that would make it riba. Giving loans is for the purpose of helping people in need, right? So that's another example of a financial act of worship. What is the best action? What is the best physical act of worship? So some of them, they say the criteria for this is مَا كَانَ نَفْعُهُ مُتَعَدِّيًا إِلَى الْغَيْرِ. One of them say that the basis and criteria for this is that which its benefit extends to others. That's the best. But another way to look at it is the best physical act of worship is the one that the greatest risk-reward is based on. What do I mean risk-reward? That brings us to another subject. You know why Salah is the best physical act of worship? You know why? It is the only act of worship, where there is a difference of opinion about the one who abandons it. There's a difference of opinion about the one who abandons it. So from this point, Salah is clearly superior to everything else. So in one sense, that which benefits others is very superior in Islam by nature. To help people, it's good, it's beautiful, it's prophetic, right? But on another end, when you look at the consequence, for the one who abandons it, you see that Salah is ahead of everything else, right? There is another way to look at it, that there is no clear best act of worship. What's better for you might not be the same as better for you or better for you, because the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا أَجْرُكِ عَلَى قَدْرِ نُصُبِكَ or nasabik. Your reward is commensurate to your struggle. So for some people, the best act of worship for them would be fasting, because fasting for them is so difficult. For other people, the best act of worship for them would be benevolence to parents, because there's nothing in the world that's tougher for them than being good to their parents. Some people, that's their test, right? And so on and so forth. So that's another third way to look at it. You guys are all following me? You're all following me? So there's three ways to look at it. Either you look at it in terms of the benefit, and obviously benefiting others is superior to just benefiting yourself. But if you look at the consequence, Salah is clearly number one, because the consequence for abandoning Salah is the greatest. And then the third way to look at it is, what is really going to help you better? Well, that which is most difficult for you to do spiritually is going to build you up the best, right? So these are the three ways to look at it. What's the consequence for abandoning Salah? Well, it depends. How are you abandoning it? So you either abandon it out of laziness, or you abandon it out of rejection. There's no difference of opinion if someone rejects the idea of Salah in Islam, that they leave the folds of Islam. There's no doubt about that. Everyone knows that. If you reject the idea of Salah, you will leave Islam. Meaning that if someone comes and says, you know what, this whole prayer thing, bowing, prostrating, it all looks like a bunch of nonsense. Why does God need me to do that? I'll just do meditation. I'm going to do meditation. I don't believe in this whole Salah thing. I'm going to do my own thing, and it should be enough. If someone says that, then they're not Muslim. They're not Muslim if they say that. Now, that's rejection. Everyone knows that. But now what about if you leave it out of laziness? This is a scary thing. It's a scary thing. Leaving Salah out of laziness, according to the majority of scholars, you still stay Muslim. You're still Muslim. but it is one of the most major sins you could possibly commit. It is one of the most major sins you could possibly commit. And the others, the Hanbali school says that if someone leaves the salah out of laziness, they leave the folds of Islam too. Because they bring a hadith, they say that which is between us and them is salah. So whoever abandons it leaves the folds. It's of course, these hadith, now the majority, they don't interpret it like that. They say that this is talking about someone who rejects it, not someone who's lazy in doing it. Because there's no precedent for us to remove someone from Islam because of actions. We remove someone from the folds of Islam because of beliefs, right? Someone believes in a prophet after Muhammad, then he leaves Islam. Someone doesn't believe in the Day of Judgment, they leave Islam. So, and actually there was this interesting debate between Imam Ahmad and Imam Shafi'i. Imam Ahmad and Imam Shafi'i. Now, of course, Imam Shafi'i is the teacher of Imam Ahmad. So Imam Ahmad is his student, Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So Imam Shafi'i asked Imam Ahmad, how do you say someone becomes Muslim? He said, by saying the Shahada. So Imam Shafi'i said, what do you say about the one who abandons Salah? So Imam Ahmad said, he leaves Islam. So then Imam Shafi'i said, but the man is maintaining his Shahada, so how can you reconcile between these two? He's saying his Shahada, and you're saying that makes him a Muslim, and he's leaving Salah, and you're saying that makes him a non-Muslim. We have a contradiction here. So they say that this is what Imam Shafi'i's proof against Imam Ahmad was in this regard, and Allahu Alam. But anyway, that shows you the severity. Nonetheless, if you want to highlight to someone the severity of not praying, tell them, according to one of four schools, if you don't pray, you're not even Muslim. That's how bad it is not to pray. Because Amud al-Islam, the primary pillar and backbone of Islam is Salah. So when you cut yourself off from Salah, you're cutting yourself off from Allah. You have no direct contact and connection with Allah Azza wa Jal if you don't have Salah. That's how severe and scary it is, right? So this is the difference of opinion about, and that's why we said the best physical act of worship in Islam is Salah, looking at the consequence. Because if you abandon zakah, no one says you're no longer Muslim. Unless you reject zakah, that's different. But if you're lazy in giving it, you're still Muslim, but you're committing a major sin, right? But for Salah, there is this difference of opinion. Wallahu a'lam. Going back to the virtues. Are the 5 daily prayers mentioned in the Quran? What do you guys think? Are the 5 daily prayers mentioned in the Quran? Some of them? Asr? Fajr? Alright. Not all of them? Are they all mentioned? Does anyone know? بس الخمس صلوات هل هي مذكورة في القرآن؟ 5 صلوات بالاسم. They are? Where? You don't know? They are. Okay. بس وين الصلوات المسماة في هذه؟ Where's the names? مش في القرآن. They say there's one indirect reference in the Quran to the 5 salawat. You want to see how? There's this verse in the Quran, it says, حافظوا على الصلوات والصلاة الوسطى. How did they get from this 5 salawat? It needs an explanation. So, حافظوا على الصلوات, preserve the prayers. This is plural. In Arabic, they say the minimum of jam' is what? 3, ثلاثة. أقل الجمع ثلاثة. And then they say on top of this, وَالصَّلَاةِ الْوُسْطَى, and the middle prayer, this wow, they say, الْعَطْفُ يَقْتَضِي الْمُغَايَرَةِ. When you have, take care of this and that, it shows you that what's before this, what's before and what's after and, 2 separate things. Take care of this and that. So salawat, 3. And middle prayer, 4. You cannot have a middle with 4. Because 2 is closer to 1 and 3 is closer to 4. The minimum of that is 5. You're going to have 3. You're going to have 2 prayers on this side, 2 prayers on that side, and then 1 prayer in the middle. They say this is an indirect reference to the 5 salawats. but they're not named in the Quran. But this is the closest reference to them. And like you said, some of you guys said, some of the prayers are explicitly mentioned in the Quran, right? Allah mentions the early hours and the late hours. In the verse you said, Allah mentions Fajr in some prayer and some of the ayat. But this verse gives us a indirect indication of 5. Now, we have 2 salawat that are layliyah and and 2 salawat that are nahariyah. We have 2 prayers that are in the day and 2 prayers that are in the night, clearly. And then we have one that's sort of in the middle, right? So how do we break this down? So we have the 2 that are at night. What are they? Obviously, Maghrib and Isha, right? The 2 that are clearly during the day are what? Dhuhr and Asr. Those are the ones that are clearly during the day, no doubt. Now, where's the transitional one where you're going from the darkness of night to the daylight? They say Fajr, right? Usually for the night prayers, you recite out loud, right? For the day prayers, you don't recite out loud. Fajr is a transition. So we recite out loud for respect to the night that's passing, it's going away, it's quickly fading away, and the sun that's about to rise, right? So which one is the middle prayer? This is just a side note. We're not really talking about that, but we're talking about if the 5 daily prayers were mentioned in the Quran. Which one's the middle prayer? So Asr, Fajr. MashaAllah, fuqaha. All right, you guys fuqaha, good guesses. So, all of them are the middle? Come on, man. No, man. So look, the majority of scholars say that the middle prayer is Asr prayers. And they say that that is the middle prayer because and why did Allah emphasize Asr? It is because it is the salah that is most susceptible to being forgotten. Why? Because it's in the middle of the hustle and bustle of the day. People are exhausted, running, racing, trying to get things done, and it could be easily forgotten. And that's why they say that whoever misses Asr prayer, his actions for that day are null and void. فَقَدْ حَبِطَ مَنْ فَاتَتْهُ صَلَاةُ الْعَصْرِ فَقَدْ حَبِطَ عَمَلُهُ فِي ذَلِكَ الْيَوْمِ. Whoever misses Asr, his actions in that day are null and void. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. So the majority of scholars say that it's Asr prayer that's the middle prayers. Imam Shafi'i, because of this explanation I gave you, 2 day prayers, 2 night prayers, and one that's transitional, he said Fajr is Salat al-Wusta. But even his own madhab, the scholars of the Shafi'i school disagreed with him. So this is one of the issues they didn't take Imam Shafi'i's opinion on, because they said that the evidences for it being Salat al-Asr are stronger, right? So this is that breakdown. And this is 5 daily prayers mentioned in the Quran. Now, what does Salah mean? Lughatan, who knows what it means linguistically? Who knows what Salah means linguistically in language? What does it mean? All right, it's Sila bin al-Abd wa Rabbi, that's true, but there's another more clear meaning for it. As-Salah huwa? Yeah, it's dua. So they say as-Salah, all right? Look at... they say as-salah wa salli alayhim inna salataka sakanun lahum, right? As the Quran says, wa salli alayhim, this is telling the Prophet ﷺ, and pray upon them. What does that mean? Make dua for them. يعني يدعو لهم. It's telling the Prophet, wa salli alayhim, يعني على المؤمنين, يعني يدعو الله لهم. Make dua for the believers, right? We say salah, you know there's salah from Allah, right? Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi, right? Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So what does salah from Allah mean? So salah linguistically means dua, supplication. What does salah from Allah mean? Means He showers His mercy. As-salah min Allah rahmah. Wa min al-mala'ikat istighfar. And it's from the angels, it's istighfar, right? Seeking forgiveness for, right? And the angels, they do salah upon the believers as well. They seek forgiveness for the believers. So it could mean istighfar when it's seeking forgiveness, when it's from the angels. Or rahmah, mercy, when it's from Allah Azza wa Jal. And linguistically, it means dua, supplication. Why was this word chosen for our salah? Is because the essence of what salah is dua. There's this hadith that says, قَسَمْتُ الصَّلَاةَ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ عَبْدِي نَصْفَيْنِ. Salah here is referring to Fatiha. You find the rest of the hadith goes to break down Fatiha. When the abd says, Alhamdulillah, Allah says kada. When Abd says Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Allah says kada. Right? So salah, the essence of what salah is all about is this mode of supplication, this very effective way of supplication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You ever think why the last thing in each rak'ah is sujood, prostration? And we know the closest you are to Allah Azza wa Jalla is in a state of prostration. So it's the last part of every unit of prayer. And it's the only action in each rak'ah that we repeat twice, right? Did you notice that? You have one ruku', you have one qiyam, one i'tidal, but then you have two sajdas, right? So the essence of what salah is all about is dua. And that's why it was named that. Now, what does it technically refer to? What does salah technically refer to? They say that it is أقوال وأفعال مفتتحة بالتكبير مختتمة بالتسليم غالبا. They say this is what the definition. Let me break this down for you guys. Salah is statements and actions that start with Allahu Akbar. It's not there. I'm saying this from another book. It's actions, it's statements and actions that start with Allahu Akbar and end with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah with certain conditions to be met. Right? This is how it is usually broken down. This is ghaliban. Why? What happens? There's a prayer that is statements, no actions. You guys know what that prayer is? Right? So we said it's actions and statements, starting with Allahu Akbar, ending with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. But is there a prayer that's only statements, no actions? There you go. Janazah. Of course, there are some actions, but those actions are extra. They're not required. Right? The actual motions of the hands, if you're going to move them, they're not required. Right? So that's an add-on, right? But the essential part of it is the takbirat and the things that you say between the takbirat. So you have statements, no actions. You also have another example of a prayer that's statements, no actions. The prayer of someone who's completely paralyzed. Someone on their... You know one of the unique things they say about salah? It is the only act of worship that you're never excused for missing. If you have consciousness, unless you have a mani', one of the preventers, like if it's the monthly cycle for the woman or something of that sort. But if you have consciousness, even if you can't move a single limb in your body, even if you could only pray with your eyes, you still have to pray. Even if you can't make wudu and you have no access, you cannot do it for one reason or another, you're still going to have to pray for the sanctity of the time. So they say that's one of the things about salah. You can pray with your eyes. If you're on your deathbed and you can't move, you're paralyzed. And then there's also, so we said it's أقوال وأفعال مفتتحة بالتكبير مختتمة بالتسليم. This also applies to something like sajdat tilawa. You guys know what sajdat tilawa is? Raise your hand if you know what sajdat tilawa is. Answer the question. What is sajdat tilawa? Go ahead. You. Anta. Yeah. Outside of prayer. What is sajdat tilawa? If you're reading the Quran, there's certain places in the Quran, there's ikhtilaf fil mawadi', by the way. There's some difference of opinion about these mawadi', but there are 14 mawdi', there are 14 places that when you read them, you should make sajda for tilawa. They say this is fi hukm as-salah. This is in the ruling of salah. That's why, according to most scholars, you have to have wudu when you do this sajda tilawa. This is in madahib al-arba'a. The four schools say, if you're reading the Quran and you come across an ayah that's an ayah of sajda, then in order to do the sajda, you need to have wudu. What do you do if you don't have wudu? They say, you say al-baqiyat al-salihat. So, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar. You don't do the sajda. This is according to al-madahib al-arba'a. There is an opinion that says that you do the sajda. That's Imam Ibn Taymiyyah's opinion. He said you can do the sajda even if you don't have wudu. But the other 4 schools, they say no. You don't do the sajda, and you just do the dhikr with your tongue, khalas. Because it is fi ma'na salah. It has the meaning of salah, even though it's not salah. Sajda tilawa. And same thing as it, sajdat shukr. You guys heard of sajdat shukr before? Anyone heard of that? Sajdat shukr is a prostration of gratitude. When some great thing happens to you and you want to express gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I know probably half of you are probably thinking of, the thing that the soccer people do when they're on the field when they score a goal. No, we're not talking about that. All right. Maybe you could do sajdat shukr for that, but anyway, that's besides the subject. Anyway, you guys got the definition of salah? You understand with clarity what it is? If you look at this page, page 47, he tells you exactly what I just said to you. The Arabic word salah is translated as prayer. And the original meaning of salah is dua. And this meaning is used in the Quran, like we said in Surah At-Tawbah, right? And then its technical meaning is what I just said. Actions and statements, starting with Allahu Akbar, ending with Assalamu Alaikum, that need to be performed a certain way. And then he mentioned the ayat that relate to salah. And then he gives us, in the first section, the times of the prescribed prayers. But we're not going to start with that one first. So the mawaqit as-salah is one of the critical subjects that we go over in the beginning of the chapter. Because it's long-winded and it needs some explanation, I'm going to make it the second subject we go over. The first subject we're going to go over is actually shara'it wujub as-salah. All right, that's going to take us to some things. Shara'it wujub as-salah. The conditions obligating prayer. Now, first thing we need to answer, do you guys know what a shart is? You know what a condition is? What is a condition? Who can explain that? Who can explain it to me? What is a shart? Shart. ما معنى الشرط? Go ahead. أيوة. It is something هو في تعريف صعب شوي بيقول ما يلزم من عدمه العدم ولا يلزم من وجوده وجود ولا عدم. تعريف في أصول الفقه. What is a shart? It is something that when it's present, it doesn't necessarily mean that whatever it is, the act is fulfilled. Of course, if you have wudu, it doesn't mean you prayed, right? But ولكن يلزم من عدمه العدم. When there is no shart, there is no mashrut. When there is no wudu, there is no salah. It is something that is kharij an al-mahiyya, as they say. It is something that is external to the actual functions of what you're talking about. It's something extra, added, right? Wudu, added, right? A rukun, on the other hand, is dakhil fil. It's something that's part of the actual act, right? So what is a rukun? A pillar. A rukun is a pillar. What is that like? Ruku', that's a pillar. Sujood, that's a pillar. Wudu, that's a shart. Wudu, that's a shart. So when we're talking about shurut and requisites of prayer, there's 2 types. There are conditions that obligate prayer, and then there are conditions that are needed for your prayer to be valid. So who is salah wajiba upon? This is the condition. This is the subject we're going to go over today, and we're going to conclude with, inshaAllah ta'ala. So requisites for obligation. Requisites for obligation. The first thing that is required for someone to be able to pray is Islam. Of course, he has to be Muslim. Because if he prays and he's not Muslim, is it going to mean anything? No, of course not. It's not going to mean anything if he prays and he's not Muslim. Now, of course, if he's not Muslim, what's expected for him? Accept Islam, then pray. Accept Islam, then pray. That's what he. But on the day of judgment, will he be accountable for everything that he abandoned from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expected from him? Yes, of course. Right? So the first condition is Islam. If you want your prayers to be accepted, it's not about doing the motions. It's about it coming from a place of devotion and worship. And this one is obvious. This one's obvious, right? The second one is bulugh. Now, children. There are 2 critical stages of growth that we need to know about when it comes to actions, a'mal. There is sin at-tamyiz, the age of discernment. What is the age of discernment? They say it's approximately at the age of 6 or 7. This is when the child starts to understand some things. Doesn't understand everything yet, but they say there's certain identifiers for it, right? يأكل وحده ويشرب وحده ويستنجي وحده. This is one sign of tamyiz. The child could clean himself, eat alone, drink alone. The child, or another, some of them say, what is tamyiz? It is when the child differentiates between what is beneficial and what is harmful. Tamyiz bain al-nafi' wal-dar. That's a sign of tamyiz. They say this happens around the age of 6 or 7. Now, at that age, this is an important mile marker, because the child starts getting hasanat for all the good things that he or she does, but they don't get any sins yet. No sins. And this is from Allah's fadl and His ihsan. They get reward for all the good things they do. But they don't get any sins for what they do. And of course, we wouldn't tell children this because we want, alhamdulillah, there's not many children here. Don't tell your kids, hey, by the way, you're not going to get punished until you're like 13 or 14. Don't tell them this because it's going to defeat the purpose. You want to try to push them, right? But do they get sins? Oh no, we have one of the kids. Now he found out. Don't tell any of the other kids, huh? Anyway, the next mile marker is bulugh. How does bulugh happen? It happens one of a few ways. It happens by certain changes in the body. For sisters, that is the monthly cycle. For boys, it is ihtilam. It's a nocturnal emission. Or it is some fluids coming out of the body. And that could happen within an age range, right? Some people have bulugh young, some people have it older. If there's something wrong, medically speaking, and none of this happens, either there's no monthly cycle or there's nothing released from the body, then in this case, it'll happen by the age of 15 lunar years. That if there's something medically wrong, if you were to suppose that's possible, then the child will be considered baligh by the age of 15. There are signs for bulugh, but that's what defines bulugh. So hair growing in certain areas, the voice changing or something like that, these are signs of bulugh. What is actual bulugh? It is by these changes actually happening in the body. Or by reaching the age of 15. So, and at that point, when that age is reached, then that's when the child will be responsible, get hasanat and get sayyi'at for everything they do. If you look at page 52, it tells you about the third condition. Page 52 is going to tell you about the third condition. What's the third condition? The third condition is soundness of mind, al-aql. So al-Islam, al-bulugh al-aql. Soundness of mind. What does this exactly mean? It means that, and this is what we call the definition of legal responsibility, hadd al-taklif. It means that if the person is not sound of mind, they will not be accountable before Allah Azza wa Jal for their actions. Now, this may be partial or complete. Sometimes, like some people with certain mental health conditions, like bipolar or schizophrenia, they go through certain episodes. It could become so extreme that they lose complete awareness or control. They don't even know what they're saying. They might be saying words of kufr and disbelief, and they don't mean it. They don't mean it because they're not in control of their faculties. This person, is he mukallaf? Is he accountable or is she accountable? No, they're not accountable, inshaAllah ta'ala. And they say that, in fact, someone who is insane is not required to pray, and neither are they required to make up prayers during insanity. So this, obviously, in fiqh language, they call this insanity, right? But we're not going to tell someone who has a mental health issue that this is insanity. This is legal definition. That's how they say. So someone who goes through a mental health episode is what? Is not legally responsible before Allah Azza wa Jal for their actions. If they're married and say he divorces his wife 1,000 times, when he's in this mental health, none of it will count. It will not count towards the talaq because he's not in control. And the same thing, or his judgment is severely impaired to the point where he can't really clearly make decisions. So in this case, it's not going to count towards him. If you know someone going through that, tell them this. If you have a mental health episode, your talaq's not going to count, right? Same thing with their salah. In fact, even out of the rahmah here, if they are in a mental health episode, they're not even going to be expected to make those prayers up. Why? Because when those prayers came in, they were not accountable. they could not comply with the command of Allah Azza wa Jal. So sometimes these episodes might last for 1, 2, 3 weeks. This person, when they emerge from this episode, they start praying again and they move on with their life. That's it. They don't need to make up the prayers because they were not mukallaf during that time. So this is the third condition for soundness. Now, sometimes, all right, this brings us to two other things. What about someone who by their own actions, they remove themselves from sanity by taking certain drugs or taking alcohol, or drinking alcohol? Are they going to be liable for their actions? Of course, because it's by their negligence and by their doing. It's by their negligence or by their doing. And in this case, when they emerge from their intoxication, they're going to be asked to make up all of those prayers, right? So that's another thing that they mention. Now, of course, what if it is due to a medical situation? Now, we have two different types of issues to address here. There is a coma, and then there is a medically induced coma, right? There is a coma, someone has a traumatic accident, and they enter into a coma, and this coma lasts for months. Could they possibly pray during that time? Of course not. They're not in control. Are they going to have to make up those prayers? No, they're not. They're not going to have to make up those prayers once they emerge from that coma because it happened through natural causes. Now, if it's a medically induced coma, like say, for example, someone goes for an outpatient surgery and they give him anesthesia and the surgery lasts for several hours and during this surgery they miss Dhuhr and Asr. Are they going to have to make up those prayers? Of course, they're going to have to because it's by our doing. Even if it's for a good reason, usually that time period is short. Medically induced coma. So if it's a medically induced coma, though, you'll have to make up the prayers. If it happens due to traumatic circumstances, then you will not have to make up those prayers. The last thing that relates to soundness of mind is about, and by the way, I think there's a Slido. I don't know if you guys, I forgot to mention that. We usually use the Slido app for questions. Are you guys aware? It was shared in the WhatsApp group. If you have questions, you could post them there. And as soon as I finish with these remaining two conditions, I will go to that Slido, inshallah ta'ala. And if you have direct questions that you'd like to ask, I know we didn't take questions yet, prepare to ask them, inshallah ta'ala. All right, the fiqh is meant to be very, very interactive. I know I'm mentioning 1,000,001 things, and it could be difficult to memorize all this stuff. You have it recorded, alhamdulillah, if you want to listen to it later on, and you could ask any question you want. All right, this is one of the things. So we're almost done for today. Now, what about sleeping? What about sleeping? All right, what about sleeping? When you're sleeping, could you possibly comply? So we said soundness of mind. When you're sleeping, your mind is functioning, but you're not in control, right? So are you liable for the prayers that you miss while you're sleeping? What do you think? What do you think? Liable in the sense that are you sinful if you miss prayers because of your sleep? But are you first question is, هل فيها إثم? Raise your hand if you think that there's sin in missing a prayer for sleep. Raise your hand. Huh? Which one? It depends. All right. Some of you said yes. All right. What about the rest of you? No sin? No sin. Okay. But what's the answer? The answer is it depends. The answer is it depends. How was the sleep done? So if the person slept, way before the time had entered, and they slept through the entire prayer, and then they woke up after, they say on a fiqhi level, we say there is no ithim, because during the prayer time لم يكن مكلفا ما كانش صاحي عن نفسه رفع عن أمتي الخطأ والنسيان وما استكرهوا عليه. And there's another hadith that says that there is رفع القلم عن ثلاث. There's three individuals. النائم, one of them is النائم حتى يستيقظ, right? المجنون حتى يفيق, الصبي حتى يبلغ. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that says that there are three who the pen has been lifted for. One of them is the sabi, the young boy until he reaches bulugh. The second one is the one who is not sound of mind until he awakes. And the third one is the one who's sleeping until he wakes up. So if he sleeps before the time, now of course on a spiritual level we could blame him. We could blame him on a spiritual level that this is not good for you spiritually. And we could blame him, depends, how are you sleeping? Are you sleeping at 2, 3, 4 a.m. and that's why you're missing Salat al-Fajr? What are you doing? Why are you doing this? On, min janib ruhi, this from a spiritual place, this is not good. This is not good. But is there the ithim of tark as-salah, which is from al-kaba'ir? No, there's no ithim of but now you have someone else who slept during the time, right? Like the shaitan, wal-iyadhu billah, he woke up for Fajr and he sat up in his bed. And the shaitan came to him and he said, "Alayka laylun tawil," right? So the Fajr's in, 10, 20 minutes in. Khalas, it's Fajr time. So I'm just going to sleep 10 more minutes. And then he wakes up an hour later and Fajr is gone. ذاك الشيطان قد بال في أذنه والعياذ بالله. That person, he committed a sin. If you sleep during the time, knowing that there is a strong likelihood that you might not wake up, then in that case, you sleeping, and you'll know this with bitajruba. It's going to happen to you 1, 10, 20 times, and you're going to know. All right, if I don't wake up right now, then chances are if I don't get up right now, chances are I'm going to miss Fajr. Right? And if I willingly choose to go to sleep then I would be committing a sin. Right? Go ahead. Well, we're going to say on a spiritual level, you're negligent. Because you didn't sleep early enough, because you ate before you slept, because you didn't put an alarm on a spiritual level. But for me to say you have the ithim and the sin of tariq as-salah, the abandoner of prayer, which is a big sin, I'm not going to put that lightly. This person needed to be in his mind and purposefully reject or purposefully delay and miss the salah because of that. So there's a difference between it. There's a spiritual level and then there's a fiqhi level. You guys understand it now? So the person could be sinful, but it depends on when he slept. If he woke up, if he was mukallaf even for a moment, and he woke up to see Fajr, and then he decided to go back to sleep, then dhanbu ala jambu. He's going to sin because of that, right? But otherwise, we'll talk about it on a spiritual level being very bad. Tamam, al-aql. So we spoke about sleep now. And that was the last of the things there for the aql. Now what about what's after that? He mentions after that something. All right, now wait, there was one more thing. So someone said it here. If you miss the prayer, you have to make it up, right? When do you have to make it up? When do you have to make it up? As soon as possible? All right. Have to, you're going to see, fiqh is going to make you very precise in your thought. Have to or should? There's a difference. Have to or should? So here, the Prophet ﷺ says, "Man nama an salatin aw nasiyaha falyusalliha idha dhakaraha la qada'a laha illa dhalik." Prophet ﷺ says, whoever sleeps on a prayer or forgets it, then let him pray it when he remembers it. That means he should hasten in doing it. Should hasten in doing it. There's nothing to make up for it except doing that. So we have two types of people who abandon prayer, right? Someone who's excused and someone who's not excused, right? Someone who's excused is like someone who someone who slept before the prayer and he really did not want to miss Fajr. He tried, but for some reason he was so exhausted and he slept through it and he missed it. He didn't want to miss it. So this is qada al-ma'dhur. This is someone who is excused for missing it. His qada is ala tarahi. He has time to make it up. Meaning he should pray it right away. That's the best thing to do, most virtuous thing to do. If he doesn't do it right away, he's not going to be falling into sin. Now the one who's not ma'dhur, that's one example of someone who's excused, right? The one who's not ma'dhur. This person, like say for example, the person who intentionally misses prayer, he needs to make it up immediately. And the more he delays, the more sin he's getting. He needs to make it up immediately. The more he delays, the more sin he is getting. Right? That's why the scholars come to a big question. All right, so if this is someone who's excused, you have a question? What do you mean? Can he make up the sunnah? Yeah. You could make up sunnah just as you make up fard. If you want to pray the sunnah, and we have this mentioned from the Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ, he missed Qiyam al-Layl one night, he made it up during the daytime. right? You could make up sunnah, just as you make up fard. No issue with that whatsoever. And we're going to get to that, inshallah. But now, a big issue they address, if the person, we all agree, no one disagrees, if someone misses Fajr, may Allah protect us. If someone misses Fajr, he has to make it up, right? Anyone disagree? Someone disagrees? You disagree? You disagree? If they intentionally miss it? How is it acceptable to make it up? Well, what do you want them to do? You're going to give them a free pass? They get sinned. And now to make up for this sin, we're going to tell you got sin, and now you have to make it up against you. Now let's put it like example, right? Like you told your son you have to clean your room. It's very messy. If you don't clean it by today, you're going to be punished, right? He doesn't clean it. And the day finishes and tomorrow comes and you see it's still very, very, very dirty. Would any mother in her right mind say, all right, you know what? Khalas, you don't have to clean it anymore. I'm going to clean it instead of you, but you're going to be punished. Would someone say that? No, you're going to clean it and you're going to be punished, right? Same logic, just like that. Of course, they get sins and they have to make it up, right? But the one who's excused for missing it, someone who's excused for missing it, do they have to make it up? Yes or no? Yes, everyone says this. All right. Now someone comes to you, this is going to be a controversial one. Someone comes to you and say, I was away from Allah Azza wa Jal for the past 10 years of my life. I was Muslim, but I did not pray. I wasn't praying. I feel really bad. I want to make tawbah. What am I supposed to do now? According to all four schools, they say, Daynullah ahaqqu bil qada. The debt that's owed to Allah needs to be made up. So we tell this person, part of your tawbah is not only for you to feel regret, but for you to make it right. How are you going to make it right? 10 years of salah. How many salahs do you pray in a year? How many salahs do you guys pray in a year? Try to do the calculation. So if it's 5 a day, and there's 365 in a year, how many is that? Who's good with math? 1,825 times 10. You have to make up 18,000 salahs, right? And you need to divide that to figure out how many fajrs, how many dhuhrs, how many asrs, مش عارف إيه. So what do we say to someone like this? We say to someone like this, instead of you praying nawafil, this is the best thing for you to do. Instead of you praying nawafil, pray qada. And you're going to normally pray 2 sunnah fajr before fajr. Pray with the intention of 2 qada. Every year you pray, it's going to be making up for 1 year you missed. You got it? You don't need to pray day and night. Of course, we're not robots, right? But if you pray for the next 10 years of your life, and you do this, with every salah you make up 1 salah, then you will be able to make up for the 10 years you missed in the 10 years that you prayed. So don't pray with the intention of sunnah anymore, pray with the intention of qada, and slowly make it up. And you know what, Ramadan comes, maybe you can even boost this up and do it, instead of the intention of taraweeh, you have the intention of qada fajr, no problem. In the Shafi'i school, there's no issue if the intention of the imam is different than the intention of the follower. I want to make up all the fajrs I missed in my life, I'm going to do that this Ramadan with all of the taraweeh, mathalan. Just as an example. But this is the opinion of the 4 schools. Is it possible you might hear something else? It's possible. But you know what it's based on? It's based on the one who abandoned salah is a murtad. They say so the people who say that the one who abandoned salah is not Muslim, they say, all right, you don't have to make it up, because guess what? The past 10 years of your life, you weren't even Muslim. If you're willing to accept that for yourself, go ahead. But I'm sure every one of us here wants to be considered Muslim for every single day of their life that was possible. Unless they reverted to Islam, that's a different story. But every one of us want to be considered Muslim. So the other opinion is actually much harsher, because it says that for the years you didn't pray, you were not Muslim. That's why you don't have to make it up. Now you're a new Muslim, right? Anyway, that's that issue. And anyone have any questions, comments before we say the last thing for today? Any questions, comments? So instead of praying the sunnah for Maghrib, you pray 3 rak'ahs. So I'm going to pray 3 rak'ahs fard Maghrib, and then I'll pray 3 rak'ahs qada of 1 Maghrib. No, you can pray it at any time during the day. It doesn't have to be during the Maghrib. If you have a free day and you say, you know what, I want to pray a lot of extra prayers right now, go ahead. You could do that, no problem. Hold on. If they passed away, some of the scholars said you could do that for them. If they passed away, some of them said that you could pray on their behalf. They say Imam al-Subki, he used to make qada of salah for his mother who passed away, and she didn't pray all her salawat. So it's warid, yani. There's an opinion that says that. Yeah. Yeah. If you have qada prayers, is it sin? Well, look at this. You're going to be held accountable for your qada prayers. That's the whole point. So you want to try to make it up as soon as possible. So, if you end up dying, having not made any effort, and you were doing sunan, then you're going to be liable for that. Allah's going to ask you. You had opportunities and you chose not to prioritize qada, which was part of your tawbah, right? So that's what would be. Wallahu alam. You go ahead. Huh? Sunnah is recommended. You don't have to make it up. If you want to make it up, you can. Yeah, you only have to make up the fard prayers. Yeah. Well, all of this is going to come up with us if you take one class at a time. But just to answer your question quickly, it is best to keep the tartib between the prayers. In fact, the majority of scholars say keeping the order of prayers is required. The Shafi'i school says that it is recommended to keep the order of prayers, meaning that you should not pray Asr after Maghrib, you should pray Asr before Maghrib, right? So that's and the majority say you have to do that. The majority of scholars say you have to do that. You can't pray Asr after Maghrib. You have to do only in one condition. If you delay Maghrib, you're going to miss it. Like if there's 5 minutes left for Maghrib and you're about to miss Maghrib, they'll say, no, this is an exception. So you don't end up missing 2 prayers, pray Maghrib first and then pray Asr. Okay? All right. So the last thing that he mentions relates to Mas'alat Turu al-Mani' and Zawal al-Mani'. These are the last conditions obligating prayer. Now, this relates to preventers, mawani'. The main example that's used for this is the issue relating to the monthly cycle. And basically, what we have here is the onset of the cycle and the end of the cycle. The onset and the end. What does the onset mean? The beginning of the cycle, yani. So say if it is dhuhr time and 10 minutes have passed into dhuhr, where a sister could have plausibly prayed in those 10 minutes had she prayed in the beginning of the time. But after 10 minutes, when she decided to make the prayer now, she went and checked and she realized that her cycle began. Or if you don't want to make it so close, say a half an hour after the beginning of the prayer. In the beginning of the prayer, she was fine, but a half an hour in, she realized that her cycle began. Is she responsible for this dhuhr prayer? Answer is yes, she's responsible for this dhuhr prayer. After her cycle finishes, she needs to make it up. The only time she won't be responsible for it is if she did not catch enough time during the prayer for her to actually perform the prayer, meaning that she noticed that her cycle began a few minutes into the prayer time. So this is the onset or the beginning of the cycle. Now the other issue, and this is something that might surprise, it usually surprises people, is the end of the cycle. The end of the cycle. Say, for example, the cycle ends during Asr time. Say there's 20 minutes left for Asr. Is the sister going to have to pray Asr prayer? Answer? Yes. The answer is she will have to pray the Asr prayers. Now, say if there are 5 minutes left for Asr and she checks and realizes her cycle has ended. And in this 5 minutes, is there enough time to do ghusl and pray? Do ghusl and make wudu and pray? The answer is no. Is she going to have to make up Asr prayers? Yes or no? Yes. Why? Because even if she can't catch it during the time, she caught the time in a state of purity and she could make it up as qada. No problem. Now here's the tricky thing. The scholars say that along with making up Asr, she will have to make up dhuhr. Why? Out of precaution. Because the end of the cycle is actually not an exact science. And sisters know this. There's actually a difference of opinion about when the cycle of a sister ends. Is it when there is kudra, discoloration, a slight yellowness in the discharge, or discoloration, I should say? Or is it when it's completely white? Some scholars say it needs to be completely clear in order for us to consider the cycle have ended. Other scholars say no, as soon as it's just discoloration, no longer any shades of brown, no longer any shades of red, none of that stuff, as long as it's just discoloration, slight tinge of yellowness or whatever, in that case, then the cycle has ended. So it's not an exact science, right? So they say, just as you combine prayers as a traveler, you're going to need to combine prayers for the purpose of qada in the end of a preventer. And namely here, the example is hayd or the monthly cycle. So she'll make up dhuhr along with asr. If her cycle ends in maghrib, then it's just going to be maghrib. It's not going to be asr and maghrib, asr and dhuhr, because you join between maghrib and isha, right? And you join between dhuhr and asr. So if it ends in isha, you'll apply the same logic. Maghrib and isha. If it ends in asr, apply the same dhuhr and asr. Those are the conditions obligating prayer. And that's the lesson for today. And now we can take some questions, inshallah. So we started, when did we start? About 9 o'clock or 8:50? Huh? 8:40? All right, today was maybe a little longer, an hour 20. I'm going to try to keep all sessions up to an hour, maximum hour 15, just so that we don't fry the brains. Yani. You had a question, sister? Go ahead. Yeah, no. Well, look, so this is a very good question. What if I didn't know this stuff until today? What if this is the first fiqh class I ever take in my life? Right? What do I do now? What do we say? We say, the scholars, they teach us that there's two types of ignorance in this regard. There is excused ignorance and inexcused ignorance. What is excused ignorance? That's for someone who is either new to Islam or was raised far away from access to this type of information. I never even knew this was a thing. I never knew that this type of knowledge existed. And I'm only being exposed to this So this may apply to someone who's a new Muslim, definitely. And it'll definitely apply to many Muslims in the West who have never ever heard of there being this type of fiqh ever. So what I say to them, if all of this is new to you, now start a page. Start a new page. And now start applying the rulings. Don't worry about the past because you had no knowledge and you didn't even know that you should be asking this type of stuff. So inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will excuse it. But now you know and you start a new page from now on. Okay, and slowly, especially if you're a revert to Islam, take it one step at a time. The Islam is an ocean of knowledge, right? Don't burn yourself with trying to apply everything in one day. It'll come, and inshallah, Allah will accept. Okay. Anyone have? There's a few questions here. Oh, there's a lot of questions that are here. Does anyone have a direct question before I look at the questions over there? Go ahead. Okay. Required. Why was it required for 1 year? Allah chose it like that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not questioned as to why He does what He does. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose it like that. And the need for it was the first seed of believers. They needed Qiyamul Layl because they're about to carry the message. It's a big burden. Right? So that's the wisdom behind it. But why was it like that? Allah chose it to be. You got it? What other questions we got? Go ahead. Well, of course, someone might miss their prayers due to excusable circumstances, right? Like, so that's not an abandoner of prayer. Someone who misses their prayer they forgot, they slept through it, there was a medical emergency or something like that, they missed some prayers. So, yeah, not every person who misses a prayer is an abandoner, right? All right, so, yeah, go ahead. What about an exam? Like that lasts for a few hours? Look, man, this is one of the tough things. I would try to get, if there is a way to get some type of excuse, you need to try it. You need to at least try. If you end up getting refused, look, if you try, you at least did what's between you and Allah Azza wa Jal. I tried. I spoke to my professor, I spoke to my whatever student affairs person, and they said there's no way, we can't make any accommodations, right? If they tell you that, then at least I have my excuse before Allah. I can't pray before the time, so don't do that. Like say, for example, I have an exam that's starting at 1 p.m. Can I pray Dhuhr at 12? No, you can't do that. You can't pray before the time, right? But you could pray it after the time as qada. And if there's no way around it, then I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal excuses you. What are you going to do? If there's no, but you don't have an excuse unless you try. Same thing with people in traveling. Happens all the time. People are too afraid to ask to pray somewhere, like on the airplane or in the airport or something like that. The airport's becoming a lot easier, but people are sometimes too afraid to ask. I'm not excused if I make no attempt to protect my prayer. All right, so you need to at least try. Wallahu alam. Yeah. There's a question over here. Can you pray while wearing anything with a picture of someone or a character on it? Or if there are any pictures in the room you're praying in? Yes, you can, but it's makruh. If you join the Jum'ah prayer at tashahhud, do you continue and pray 2 rak'at or 4 rak'at normal? You pray 4 rak'at, because if you miss the ruku' of the second rak'at, you miss Jum'ah. So if you catch it at tashahhud, you're going to pray 4 rak'ahs. Is it okay or good to make dua during sujood? Of course, it's amazing to make dua. That's the closest position you are to Allah Azza wa Jal. Please make dua in sujood. If someone was away from prayer for years, do they make up those prayers? If so, how does one make up those prayers? We answered this question. Yes, you need to make up those prayers. You need to. Even if you didn't, like say if you knew missing prayers was bad, but you didn't know you're going to have to make them up, that doesn't excuse you. You have to make up those prayers. Can a bleeding... and of course, the only exception to that is a revert. You don't have to make up prayers that you missed before Islam. Can a bleeding woman make sajda outside of salah? No. You cannot. Sajda is for salah, and someone who's not in a state of purity cannot make sajda. There's no, what purpose would you make sajda for? There's tilawa and there's shukr. What else are you going to do sajda for? We don't do sajda for the fun of it. If you want to do sajda, pray. You don't just do sajda for the sake of it. We don't have that. Why? How to properly make up missed obligatory prayers? And can one make up nawafil when making up? You can make up nawafil, as we said, and we're going to get to the making up prayers later on. When a woman's bleeding ends, how does she start praying again? The book describes this on page 52 and 53. We already described this. So when it ends, you would pray that prayer and the prayer that would be made up with it. If you catch any moment of the prayer in a state of purity. If you miss the third or fourth rak'ah in a jama'ah, we're going to get to those types of questions later on. Is the dua at the beginning of the salah mandatory? No, it's not. Can a woman enter the mosque while bleeding? We're going to get to something like that. If following Shafi'i school, is it permissible to recite the Quran as a student? I think I know what you're trying to ask. Inshallah, it's going to come up with us, inshallah. A lot of these questions are going to come up, idhnillahi ta'ala. What about medically induced long-term comas that was administered to treat something severe that might not have been decided by the patient? As far as I know, it's still going to be treated because it was by the doing of our actions or human actions, even if it wasn't decided by the patient. As far as I know, you would still have to make up those prayers. Allahu alam. All right, does anyone have any other direct questions? I think I answered a good portion of the question. All right, so here the book states that when a woman is expecting the end of her period, she would check before each prayer. What about when at work? Saddidu wa qaribu. I know it's not an easy thing. This is something that we'll go over more in the chapter of purification, but try your best. Try your best. Of course, within reason. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to live in the bathroom. That's impossible. But you just do your due diligence at certain checkpoints, at certain critical times. When the prayer ends, when the prayer begins, and when the prayer ends especially, those two times. And if that's all you could do, then inshallah Allah will accept. Any other questions before we end? Go ahead. Fard prayers? No. fard prayers, you should not hold the mushaf. The only prayers that you could hold the mushaf for are nawafil. And there's a difference of opinion about that. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, like if you know people, there's certain people who have certain mental health conditions. Well, you would know, and they would know. Like if you're someone who's close enough to them, you'd be able to tell. Like there are people, they might not be diagnosed because they don't believe in mental health, and they don't go for that, but they literally lose it. Their sentences don't even make sense. They might start acting very odd, even like especially if you're talking about people who have bipolar or schizophrenia, people who are manic, and these people, it might go very far. May Allah help them, may Allah bless them, may Allah give shifa for them. Anyone who's struggling with anything from the Ummah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may Allah reward them for their patience with it. Allahumma ameen. But people are going through severe stuff. When it's to that point, sometimes it's not to that point. Sometimes it's very light and maybe just like a little bit, their judgment's a little off. They'll like do a little bit extra spending or like irrational decisions. But for the most part, they're keeping with their prayers and acting fine. In that type of situation, they're mukallaf. But when it's off the charts, that's when they're excused. Yeah, inshallah. All right, last question. Yeah. Yeah. If you, inshallah, your salahs, you look, distraction in prayer, we deal with this on a spiritual level. Fiqhi level, your prayer is going to be accepted, inshallah. And it's a jihad. Try your best. Focus as much as you can, and inshallah, Allah will accept from you whatever you put forth, inshallah. All right? Jazakumullah khair, guys. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. We'll continue next week. Assalamu alaikum.